This is an AMI podcast.
Think we'll ever get home? David asked. Max rolled his head to look at his brother-in-law's profile. Like the rest of them, David was streaked with dirt. Some was clumped into his beard. No one had shaved in a week. Hell, no one had taken off their boots. Max started to answer, but David was already asleep. Welcome to AMI Audiobook Review. I'm Ramya Amadin, your host for the show, and it's Saturday, September 4th, 2021. This is our very first episode where we're going to talk all things audiobooks, and when I say we, I really do mean we, because it's not just me out here. My co-host and the girl behind the scenes helping us tech the show, Nizreen Abdelmajid, is also here with me. Niz, how's it going?
I'm good. It's so exciting. The very first show. How are you feeling?
Oh, feeling like we're gonna see how it goes. But I am really, really excited because a little bit about me. I'm the co-host of Kelly and Company here on AMI Audio as well. And really, I love talking audiobooks, Niz. So last year sometime we started our very own book club on Kelly and Company, and it's a monthly book club at the last Tuesday of the month. We love to chat audiobooks. We love taking recommendations from people in the community, and it's just so great because it made me realize, oh, I can read a minimum of 12 books a year. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. And now with this show, I think we can get into some of the deeper conversations around audiobooks and not just the specific recommendations from people, but I'm talking book reviews and what's trending on our favorite platforms where we like to listen to our audiobooks and what the community has to say about the things we talk about, right? Narration and speed and genre and captivity and how audiobooks are getting to the mainstream now. Nizreen, I'm going to take a pause here and maybe talk a little bit about your exploration into audiobooks. And you want to give us an insight on your journey with audiobooks thus far.
So there's no secret that I'm not into books in general, but let me tell you why. It's because when I started losing my vision, I wasn't really motivated to grab a book and try to take a picture every second. I didn't know there was so much resources to reading a book, listening to a book. I didn't know about all this stuff when I started losing my vision. So that didn't motivate me to get into books even more, even though when I was younger, I was so into books in general. That started to fade away. But recently, when I started learning about audiobooks on AMI and I got more into it and I started listening to it on Kelly and Company, the afternoon show. So I am really excited to get into this show because this is going to motivate me. This is going to push me into reading more books, into listening to more books. So I'm really excited to get into it. This is my push.
Absolutely, girl. And we're here for you. There's a whole bunch of us that are totally into audiobooks, myself included. And we can get into a lot of the discussion base, but we'll always backtrack to you to see how you're doing with the audiobook exploration and with getting to know the different platforms. Here in Canada, we now have access to audible.ca and audiobooks.com, as well as CELA, the before mentioned CELA, Center for Equitable Library Access. And these platforms have made it incredible for the blind, low vision community and beyond, to be honest, people with print disabilities and beyond, to get into audiobooks, because honestly, the conversations around audiobooks have really, really expanded into something more than just a disability aspect. It's become more mainstream. A lot of people I am currently in the midst of converting, including you, to audiobook listening. And it's because, people know about it now. I have cited friends who over the years have heard me talk on and on about audiobooks, or just in general, me saying, I listen to my books, and they say, what does that mean? And then, going into the explanation or giving them a tease like, for example,
it's
Harry
convenient.
Potter. It is. It's very convenient, and it's a real interesting way to continue on your book reading journey, but do it in a way that maybe feels more flexible. Commutes, car rides, bus rides, or different activities that you're doing. Maybe you're lounging and you would rather pick up an audiobook and rest your eyes than to pick up a physical book, even with the option there. So really looking forward to more conversations. I want to go back to CELA for another few minutes because as you scroll further down the homepage for CELA, we're going to feature some of the audiobook recommendations from their Check It Out section. So this is the next heading down. There are a lot of categories there. I believe there's 7, but the category we're featuring today is the awards section. And the accolade that I want to focus on is Canada Reads 2021. Lots of people following Canada Reads, so why not? The winning title for Canada Reads this year is Johnny Appleseed by Joshua Whitehead. Other top titles from this year's Canada Reads include Hench by Natalie Zine Walshutz, Butter Honey Pig Bread by Francesca Iguiazzi, and Two Trees Make a Forest by Jessica J. Lee. Oh, also The Midnight Barkin by C.L. Polk. And let's take a closer look, actually, at the winning title, Johnny Appleseed by Joshua Whitehead. It's a Canadian fiction piece available in human narrated audio and human transcribed braille on CELA. Here's a synopsis from the book. A cyber sex worker who fetishizes himself in order to make a living, self-ordained as an Indian glitter princess, Johnny has 1 week before he must return to the res and his former life to attend the funeral of his stepfather. The 7 days that follow are like a fevered dream, stories of love, trauma, sex, kinship, ambition, and the heartbreaking recollection of his beloved Kokum grandmother. Johnny's world is a series of breakages, appendages, and linkages, and as he goes through the motions of preparing to return home, he learns how to put together the pieces of his life. Released in 2018, this is a very fun part of the show where we check in with a guest or a contributor and basically talk to some other people. So let's get right into it and check in with an audiobook listener. I don't want to scare anybody by calling them an avid audiobook listener, so we'll hear directly from the guest. And we're basically wanting to open up the space to discuss, to recommend, browse, conceptualize, reminisce on audiobooks, whatever you want to do, we want to hear it. And we're very excited and pleased to welcome our very first guest on AMI Audiobook Review. A very good friend of mine. I feel like I've got really good friends all over the show. So a very good friend of mine in Toronto, Yang Wang, joining us today. Yang, how are you?
Hello, Ramya. I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. This is a really exciting show for us and to get started on this pilot. So before we get digging deep into audiobooks, I'm wondering if you can tell me a bit about yourself. I mean, I know a little bit about you, but for our listeners.
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, I'm not an avid book reader, so
Okay.
I'm a little bit nervous. But you know what? In Chinese, we have an idiom, 抛砖引玉, meaning you throw out a brick. So that is like made of mud or, less valuable in order to encourage other people to throw out their gem. Like really knowledgeable people to share their views, very valuable opinion. So I'd love to be that brick for you.
Okay, so
it a
that's a
try.
really good place to start. It's a really good place to start. Okay, but you do some audiobook listening, Young.
Oh yes. I joined a couple of blind book clubs in order to force myself to read more books. And I really enjoy that experience. And also I am running a nonprofit organization, the East and West Learning Connections. Like we help people of different heritages to break cultural barriers and get connected. So we introduce all this learning and communicating and volunteering opportunities for the public, especially immigrants, but we are open to everybody. So right now we are running several book clubs there also. But they're basically for sighted people, but open to everyone too. So I'm blind, so I use Bookshare. When they read a book, I use Bookshare or the voiceover, whatever, JAWS, screen reader to read the books they're reading. Yeah. So I joined these book clubs to force myself to read a little bit more.
That's a great way to start, though, right? I mean, if you know that you're not as avid of a book listener, but you're curious about what other people have to say or want to know, where to start, book clubs are the best way. And there's so many audiobook clubs now here too, Young. Are you part of one that's explicitly audiobooks or with other blind and low vision
Yes.
people? Yeah.
Yeah, I joined a couple of blind book clubs. One organized by Peter and Paula, the couple, the other run by Judith. Yeah, to join blind book club, the wonderful thing is the books they pick usually are audiobooks, like mostly human narrated books. So that's really enjoyable.
If you don't mind sharing a bit about your journey into audiobooks, have you ever had vision? Were you ever able to read physical books before getting into audiobooks?
Oh yeah, before I have this retinitis pigmentosa condition, so I gradually lost my vision. But before, when I was young, before I lost my vision, I read books by my eye. So I love reading novels. Still right now, I love reading novels. Yeah, I'm like a story eater. I just want stories about people, about this
Yeah.
world. Yeah,
And
but after I lost my vision, so then that's where I started to listen to audiobooks.
right. And that's transition. I can relate a little bit as well. Not that my vision has changed drastically, but when I was younger, I used a lot more of my vision than I do now. I feel like it's
Mhm,
just because I don't want to spend too much time reading as I used to, blowing up fonts to 16 and 18 bold, and my eye
mhm.
strain would be really, really terrible. So when I was younger, I would actually pretend to read books. In school when they
Oh
they hand
yeah.
you in school when they hand you different book programs like the Maple
Mhm.
book. What do they call it? Did they even call those book clubs, Nizreen? You know what I'm talking about? White Maple and Red Pine, the reading groups in
Oh
school.
yeah. No, they don't call them the book clubs anymore. I don't think so. But I
No,
just remember going on Google and being like a summary of this book.
exactly.
Every time they would ask us just to give a summary of the book or how did you like the book, asking like in-depth conversations.
Hmm.
And that's when I turned to Google. I'm like, I'm not reading this whole book. I don't have time to read this whole book. And it
Yep.
looks boring. But when it's for fun, you like the book. It's just when they assign the book to you, then you're like, nah, I'm not down for that.
Okay, Young, I want to go back to some memories that you share when it comes to thinking of books or reminiscing on your book reading life. Is there anything that you want to share with us there?
Well, I always enjoy reading novels. When I was a kid, like my siblings, my sisters and brother, they're all much older than me, and so they borrow novels like for adults, and well, I just enjoy it. So it opens the door to other people's world. So I can be there and experience all other people's lives. Um, so that's just very interesting.
And your father, he was really into writing. So there was a huge
Oh,
connection
yeah.
there for you as well.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for mentioning him. Yes, he is a poet. I mean, he's not a professional poet, but he really wrote very good classic poems. Um, I actually helped him edit and publish a poetry book of his.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so he wrote. books all his life. But I started to do this in 2008. At that time, I just quit my job. So I didn't tell them because they would, worry too much about me. I didn't tell them, but I never regret about quitting the job because at that time my parents lived with me. I have 2 young kids. So I quit the job, and then I had enough time to help him edit this book. So I typed them. At that time, my vision was still good. So I typed them into Word document. So that's big project, took years. And before he passed away in 2015, we were just lucky enough to, have everything done. And he also corrected, mistakes, do some adjustment, everything, rewrite. We have everything done. And after he passed away, I published it. And
Wow.
it is now on the shelf in Harvard bookstore. And you know what? In the week it was on shelf, and it was selected as one of the featured books in their newsletter
That's
in Harvard
amazing.
bookstore. Yeah.
I mean, not only
Yeah.
is this like a real great insight for you into the literary world as your father is a poet, but just being able to help so much behind the scenes and putting this legacy together for him, that's so incredible, and something to honor.
Yes, and I'm not so good at the classical poems. I regret I didn't learn more when I was a kid. But they're very beautiful. When I'm getting older, I start to be able to appreciate them more.
Hmm.
But to help him, do all this, I started to learn more about poems and also the history of the country, the history of my family. So it's like a very precious moments, time we spend together.
That is so
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
And
yeah.
truly, a way to bond over something like this. I mean, the behind the scenes of being able to put this together while you read and reminisce on your father's poetic writing is just so wonderful. And Young, I want to get to something before we run out of time with you today, and it's a recommendation. You read a lot of your own cultural books because, as you said, English is a second language to you, or is it a third language?
Oh, second. I can
Okay,
only
second. Okay,
speak Chinese and English. Yeah,
okay, perfect. But
yeah.
I would love to hear a recommendation from you if you don't mind giving us one.
Oh, sure. I would love to recommend this author to your listeners. He's Peter Hessler. He is a staff writer for The New Yorker, and he was the magazine's correspondent in China from 2000 to 2007. And before that, he was a Peace Corps volunteer in China teaching English in colleges. So he makes friends with ordinary people, so get travel throughout the country. So he really get down to the earth, real life and real spirit of the people of the land there, but also with the perspective of an outsider.
Young, it was a really fun time talking to you about audiobooks on our pilot episode of AMI Audiobook Review, and honestly, really appreciate you being our very first guest. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Ramya. My pleasure.
We were speaking with Yang Wang, good friend of mine here in Toronto, to talk all things audiobooks in her life. And after the break, we're going to wrap up the show and remind you of some of our recommendations and featured books from today. We'll be right back. This is AMI Audiobook Review. Ramya Amudan, the hosts of the show here with Nisreen Abdelmajid, and we're here to wrap up the pilot. So much conversation today, lots of great recommendations from friends of the community, friends of my own personally, as well as CELA, the Center for Equitable Library Access, lots of things to check out, audiobooks in all forms, human narration, if you prefer some other kinds of narration with synthetic audio. But really, the options are out there, and we're here to remind you. We also talked about the winning book of Canada Reads 2021, Johnny Appleseed by Joshua Whitehead. And this is one featured by CELA as well. You can find it on their Check It Out page under awards, because they did have a ton of accolades for this release. And it's quite a recent release as well. Lots of representation, including Indigenous and LGBTQ plus for your notes. The Meaning of Mariah Carey by Mariah Carey. This is a memoir. And you know what, Nazreen? The review itself that was written by a fan was so hugely impactful as I was going through it. I thought, oh, maybe I will read this book or listen to this audiobook, compared to the title and just thinking, maybe not. This is not really my type of thing. I'm not a super fan of Mariah. How about you?
I'm a super fan of Mariah. I'm not a super fan, but I'm a fan, an average fan of Mariah Carey. But I've learned to read fans' biographies, like fans writing their biographies of different celebrities. I feel like they go more in depth. They're relatable, and they're much more interesting than, regular biographies and documentaries. So this is an exciting one. I'm excited to read it, even though I'm not the biggest fan and I don't know much about her. I'm just an average fan, as I remind you. But it makes me want to read more documentaries of different celebrities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when you read something written by fans, like in this case, we're talking about the review of the audiobook, right? But anything in any circumstance, projects that fans take on, it just feels like the love comes out. So if you're open to it, if you're not going, no, I'm not going to check it out because I'm not a fan of Mariah. If you're saying, well, I'm curious, I think that they pull out the parts of celebrities or influences that you're like, oh, wow. Yeah, I never knew about this. It's definitely palpable. And that's how I felt with the energy level, just her talking about Mariah's lyrics or her hair being a character itself. It was just so fun the way that it's written. And that's honestly the magic thing about books, fictitious characters or real people, places, things, experiences, history, whatever it is we take. It just feels like we get to jump into a part of something that we start off thinking, I don't know. But by the end of it, you do know based on what you've experienced.
Yeah. It gives you a different perspective. It doesn't matter about the book. It just gives you a different perspective and the information that you never looked at before. And even Mariah Carey, like there's so many things where I'm like, I didn't think that she was that influential. But when you start looking into it and reading that information, you're like, wow, that's a different perspective that we're looking at. There's more information to that. The way it's written, the way it's said, the way it's portrayed is just different than what we thought it would be. And I don't know if that makes sense, but
absolutely.
in every book, that just gives me a different perspective. I never think the book would, be like that originally, but when I get into it, when I read different perspectives, even I told you on Google, when you read a synopsis of a book and it's written differently by each person, you're like, oh, this person's looking at it this way, this person's looking at it this way. It's all the information combined. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and you get to know the writers, you get to know the writers and the narrators, because you're putting something together that isn't just, for the most part at least, I wrote it, I narrated, and I produce it and put it out there, right? These projects are very collaborative, even for a one narration read for audiobooks. So it's incredible to see that you can get so much more out of there. The perspective that you're talking about is the perspective of the author, the editor,
Yes.
the whole thing. So like that's the deep dive end of it, and then the other side is like how it just influences you when you read something that and put the book down and think, okay, like was this impactful, or on to the next one?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well said.
Well, we are very excited because this was our first episode of AMI Audiobook Review, and we're so glad that you've joined us through this journey, this experimental conversation.
It was fun.
It was fun. It was so much fun, and we'll be back next week, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern on AMI Audio. We're also available via podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Search for AMI Audiobook Review and just check out what you've missed or recheck out what you want to share with your community. Thank you so much. I'm Ramia Amuddin, and the hosts for this show are myself and Nisreen Abdelmajid. We'll be back next Saturday, as we're a weekly show on AMI Audio. Till then, have a great week.
This was an AMI podcast. For more accessible media, visit ami.ca.